5 innocent children lured to their deaths by vile predators posing as responsible adults. The depraved crimes of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley still horrify generations more than half a century on.
It's haunted the psyche of the nation in a way that means we won't ever let it go.
Brutal murders and the devastation they cause is overshadowed by the infamous killer couple, whose notoriety shows little sign of waning.
I don't think the memories of the Moors murders will ever fade away.
It's never, ever forgotten. It doesn't leave you.
Crimes so deeply ingrained in British history that they change the very fabric of our society.
Myra Hindley was described as the most evil woman in Britain.
Decades on, loved ones are still grieving.
This is what I live with all day and all night. I have a 3 hours sleep. You're still thinking about it.
Now families reveal their pain to us, with one still searching for a body after all this time.
No matter what they do, they will not give up on searching for Keith.
The murders of Pauline, John, Keith, Leslie Ann and Edward make this a crime that shook Britain. The sprawling housing estate of Hattersley, near Manchester. 17-year-old David Smith makes a call to the police, claiming to have witnessed a murder.
Police picked him up at the phone box and took him to the police station in Hyde, where, of course, police officers listened to this astonishing story that he had to tell.
Smith recalls being at a house the previous evening with 2 friends, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. There's also a 3rd man in the house. That man is 17-year-old Edward Evans, who appears to be a friend of Brady's. But nothing could be further from the truth, and it isn't long before Smith sees a change in Brady. As he sits outside smoking, his attention is drawn to a fight inside the house.
Brady attacked him with an axe.
David Smith recounts rushing back into the room to see the visitor fighting for his life. But Brady delivers blow after blow. Allegedly fearing for his safety too, Smith helps Brady to hide Edward's body in a room upstairs.
He saw what had happened, and he went back to see his wife afterwards, and between them they realised that he was the only person who'd seen what had happened. They contacted the police in the morning, and the police went to Wardlebrook Avenue.
The house on Wardlebrook Avenue belongs to the grandmother of 23-year-old Myra Hindley, who claims she was in the kitchen at the time of the attack. 2 officers rushed to the address, with one disguising his uniform so as not to alert the occupants.
Hindley answered. He said he'd come because there had been reports of a serious crime at the house the night before. Hindley pooh-poohed the whole idea, but nevertheless he got into the house. Hindley was very reluctant to let him into one particular room, a room which was locked. Brady said to Hindley, "Give him the key."
True to David Smith's unbelievable account, the police are faced with a horrific sight.
They found the body of Edward Evans in Myra Hindley's bedroom, trussed and tied and covered. You know, shocking pictures of what happened.
The grim discovery of the murdered teenager would take detectives on a trail leading back more than 2 years.
Pauline Reed lived in Gorton, and she was on her way to a dance at the local co-op. She loved dancing, apparently, and went regularly with her friends.
That evening, 16-year-old Pauline agrees to meet friends at the British Railways Social Club. After getting ready for the dance, she leaves her house and makes the short journey alone. But she never arrives. Her family search the streets of her hometown but find nothing other than one of Pauline's gloves. Despite local residents pulling together and media interest to try and find the young girl, she vanishes without a trace. Four months on, and just 5 miles away in Ashton-under-Lyne, 12-year-old John Kilbride is at the outdoor market.
He'd been to the pictures on a Saturday afternoon with his pal, as they did most Saturday afternoons. And at the end of the picture show, they went to Ashton Market, which was again something that they did fairly regularly because young boys locally knew that they could pick up a few coppers at Ashton Market by helping the market traders clear away rubbish at the end of the day.
After wandering around the stalls trying to help the traders, John becomes separated from his friends and is never seen again.
He used to do a bit of work, you know, packing up on the market to earn a couple of bob for pocket money and give so much to my mother when he came home. I remember my mother kept looking at the clock and time was getting on a bit. John didn't come home that night, and the house was full of police the next day, you know, and then this search started off. Then later on that week, where they were searching all the houses on the street, the attics and the back gardens and sheds and everything, you know, and it just escalated like that.
2 children are now missing from the Greater Manchester area in a matter of months. And despite wide-scale searches and appeals, no information leads to their discovery. And then, just 7 months later, the community would be rocked once more with the disappearance of 12-year-old Keith Bennett.
Keith was always cheeky, that's not surprising, having a mother like he had. He was cheeky, he loved to play, he loved playing football, he loved his brother, his sisters. He just loved to be the normal little boy. He was a monkey. Keith was a monkey.
Keith lived in Longsight, in the Longsight area with his mum and family, and he went off to visit his gran one evening.
Keith Bennett had celebrated his 12th birthday just 4 days before. With his mother, Winnie, going out for the evening, they walk along Stockport Road together. Then Keith makes his way to his grandmother's house, alone. This is the last time his mother would ever see him.
Winnie never gave up hope. She was the strongest, courageous woman I ever met in my life.
Keith broke his glasses the day before at the swimming baths, and so she got the glasses to go and get them repaired. Of course, when he went missing, he didn't have his glasses with him, so that was the only thing she'd got left.
Six months on from Keith's disappearance, a family just a few miles away would experience a similar heartache.
She was very quiet. She'd do anything for you, and we had no trouble whatsoever. She was never naughty, very obedient. She loved her school. She's just a wonderful child you could have or wish to have.
10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey lives with her 3 brothers, mother Anne, and her partner Alan in Ancoats, Manchester.
They used to go out to play. They used to say, well, don't go far, so we could see where they were. And they're very obedient children. You didn't have to shout at them or anything like that. Leslie came in and she said, is it all right if I go to the fairground with her 2 friends and a friend's mother? So I said, yeah, as long as you're back for 5 o'clock, because you'll have your tea ready. because I used to do like the tea and dinners and whatever, you know. So then when 5 o'clock came, we started to worry then, because she wasn't a girl that would disobey you. You know, she'd have been there, and we had a tea already out for her, laid out for her, like for when she'd come back.
Alan and his family rushed to search the fairground, just yards from their home.
So Anne and I got our coats on, went down. There was nowhere to be seen. Just disappeared.
Over a 17-month period during 1963 and 1964, 4 children in the Greater Manchester area have disappeared. 16-year-old Pauline Reed, 12-year-olds John Kilbride and Keith Bennett, and now 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey hasn't returned home after visiting a local fair.
Went down and saw the desk sergeant and told him what happened. So he said, come back at 11 o'clock. So we went back just before 11, saw him again, and that's when he took particulars. But I think if they'd have acted straight away, it was possible that they could have done something.
As frustration mounts, Alan has to also deal with unfounded accusations from the police.
They were saying to me, come clean, what have you done with her? Where is she? Have you hurt her? And they was asking Anne the same questions. I was in there hours, possibly 6, 7 hours.
Officers realise Leslie's family are not responsible for her disappearance and launch a hunt to find her. For 10 agonising months, they cling to numerous reported sightings, but these lead nowhere. The following October, and a chance meeting between 2 strangers at a railway station would help police to unravel the mystery of the disappearing children. "17-year-old Edward Evans is outside the buffet bar at Manchester Central railway station.
He was on his way to a football match, and for some reason was at Central Station.
The apprentice engineer is approached by a young man and never makes it to the match.
Not entirely clear what the circumstances of that meeting were, but he was taken back to Wardlebrook Avenue.
His decision to leave with the stranger ultimately costs Edward his life. Despite being lured back to Hindley's grandmother's house, under the pretense of a party with alcohol, the mood quickly changes as the teenager is viciously attacked.
Brady just started beating him about the head with an axe. Just an horrific crime. Astonishingly, grandmother is upstairs in bed and oblivious to all this. This lad understandably started screaming, obviously trying to defend himself and save his life. And Brady then went and got a piece of electric cable and strangled him.
This horrific act of violence on a defenseless young man is witnessed by at least one other person, who will eventually lead the police to further chilling discoveries.
He didn't only tell them, of course, of what he had personally witnessed. He'd also told them that Brady had said to him that there had been other bodies, there had been other murders, and in reference to the actual murder of Edward Evans had used the words, "It was the messiest yet."
Nobody can anticipate where these words are to lead.
It was the days immediately after Edward Evans's death where the whole case really, or the whole campaign of Brady and Hindley totally unravelled.
2 names that up until now nobody knew of. At the point of Edward's murder, the couple are just 27 and 23 years old. When questioned, both are quick to offer their version of events.
Initially, the evidence, of course, was simply they had got a man who admitted that he'd had a fight with Evans and had killed him.
Hindley is quick to position herself in another room, away from the attack. As both are interrogated, the house is painstakingly searched and gives up further clues.
Various items were removed from the house. One item that was removed was an exercise book, and the exercise book contained various drawings and doodles and names. Brady, when asked about the book, said, "Oh, some no consequences, just a book I used to draw in, or do doodles in and what have you." They said, but there are names in it, and one of the names was John Kilbride.
This can be no coincidence. There have been no sightings of John since his disappearance at a local market, and police now have grave concerns that he has met a similar fate to Edward Evans. The investigation quickly gathers pace as photographs of Hindley and Brady are found at the house posing on nearby Saddleworth Moor. Worryingly, David Smith also mentions other victims in his statement, claiming Brady spoke about bodies buried at this location. This, coupled with the photographs, lead police to one conclusion. Fearing Saddleworth Moor to be a burial ground for the killer couple, they take the decision to search for John Kilbride. Dozens of officers are drafted onto the vast barren land in Yorkshire to search for any clues. As this gets underway, other officers question a young neighbour of Hindley's grandmother, which compounds their growing suspicions.
Only days after the Edward Evans killing, they did house-to-house inquiries, and they spoke to a 12-year-old girl, and the 12-year-old girl told them of evenings that she spent with Hindley and Brady. But the girl also told police of trips that they made up to the moors, where they drank wine and chatted.
At this point, Hindley's young neighbour has managed to pinpoint a specific spot on the moors of particular interest to them both. This sparks another mass search. And as the evidence mounts, officers make another startling discovery at the grandmother's house when they find a prayer book.
In the spine of the prayer book, they found these two left luggage tickets for Manchester Central Station, and what they discovered was in fact a veritable Aladdin's cave almost of evidence. Coches, masks, wigs, but even more significantly they found dozens and dozens of photographs.
Some of these photographs showed Brady and Hindley on Saddleworth moors, whilst others would confirm officers' worst fears. Horrific images of missing local girl Leslie Ann Downey.
They also discovered the two pretty horrifying tapes. One of Leslie Ann Downey pleading effectively to be freed, to be allowed to go back to her mother, with the voices of Brady and Hindley also on the tapes.
Bob Spears is a young officer new to the job and has been given the unenviable task of searching for victims.
It was a result of photographs found in a suitcase that we'd all gone back to this location on the moors. On the 15th, which was a Friday, October, everybody went on this massive search. All the surrounding police areas sent men. It was decided to give them about 4 o'clock. We got nothing by then, we're going home. By the time I was working, my attention was drawn up the hillside. So I climbed up and looking over, and you looked over the roadway, the reservoirs, the views, it's fantastic. But it's so quiet, there's no birds twittering, it was silence. And what I saw was a depression in the peat with water. And something was sticking out of it.
The young officer gathers his colleagues and urges them to look closer.
Our main reason for being that day was to find John Kilbride. We didn't find him, but we found Leslie Ann.
4 different police forces have joined together to search Saddleworth Moor for the body of John Kilbride, a 12-year-old boy who vanished from a local market 2 years previously. But in a dramatic twist, it isn't the body of John that an officer discovers, but that of another missing child, 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey. This discovery would confirm everyone's worst fears, and in order to link the little girl's death with Brady and Hindley, police have to ask her family to look at some of the horrendous evidence they have found.
It was a heartbreak. Didn't know what to do. That's what my nightmares are, each and every night. About Les. What I see and what we heard. Of the tapes they played. We've left Leslie asking if she could go home. And you could hear Hindley saying, "Be quiet, I'll smack you again." That will never leave me. Never get me out of my mind.
As the devastating reality sinks in, Alan and Anne must face another nightmare.
We stood in the corridor. Next thing is, these couple walked past, being escorted. So this police officer said, "Do you know them?" So I said, "No." He said, "It's Hindley and Brady."
And just 5 days later, the horror continues, as the search teams also discover John Kilbride's body, almost 2 years on from his disappearance, and close to where Leslie Ann has been found.
They brought John's shoe, and we just heard a scream downstairs, which was my dad. My mum, she was just sat in tears. She was a very quiet person, my mother.
The brutal murders of Edward, John and Leslie are now rapidly becoming one of the largest investigations in the country. Officers interrogate the suspects, but they remain defiant and uncooperative. Yet the evidence is undisputable. As the nation begins to learn of the horrific circumstances surrounding the children's deaths, the case into Brady and Hindley is prepared for Crown Court.
They were both sentenced to life in prison, and I don't think many people thought they were ever going to come out.
There wasn't a care between the two of them. Smiling at one another. They stood side by side. They're just smiling. So we shouted out, "Ain't the bastards." We just walked away, took them downstairs, and that was it.
With the death penalty recently abolished, Brady is given 3 life sentences for the murders of Edward, John and Leslie Ann, and Hindley receives 2 life sentences for her part in the killing of Leslie and Edward. This punishment, though, provides little comfort to the families of the children.
Well, you just have to carry on with life. You have to just carry on. You got 3 boys.
Everything, it just went. The happiness went from the house, and there was nothing there.
As Alan, Terry and the other families try to cope with their grief, the world is left wondering who Ian Brady and Myra Hindley are, and why they are driven to such acts of evil.
Ian Brady had quite a checkered background as a youngster. He went to Borstal and prison on several occasions, primarily for dishonesty, not for any violent crimes. He was born in Scotland, born in Glasgow, and following one conviction, he appeared at court in Glasgow, and the presiding judge said that he should be moved to England, to Manchester, because his mother had moved down to Manchester, and he believed that this may sort Brady out. Highly intelligent man, taught himself bookkeeping, and then got a job at Millwards, where he met Myra Hindley.
Hindley is a local Manchester woman, mainly raised by her grandmother, with no previous convictions prior to this. As people try to comprehend the indiscriminate way the pair hunted their victims, 2 other children remain missing. The whereabouts of Pauline Reed and Keith Bennett are still a mystery. But the killers are to reveal nothing more. Decades on, Ian Brady is diagnosed as a psychopath after years in a mainstream prison, and is moved to a high-security hospital, where a journalist looking to help the families of Pauline and Keith pays Brady a visit.
I knew the families were grieving. I resented the way they were exploited by the tabloid media just for the sensational projection of Myra's face on their front page now and again, just to get people worked up. And when I had a chance to do something to put the record straight, I took the opportunity.
Fred Harrison has no idea where his conversations with the killer will lead, but he presses on.
I needed him to confirm facts that he would rather suppress. So that was a difficult psychological exercise for him to perform, to somehow keep his mind closed to what he'd done, but at the same time share enough evidence for me to be able to go away one day and somehow screw Myra, which was his agenda.
Hindley is still denying any involvement in the murders and placing the blame firmly on Brady.
He knew that he had to stay in prison till he died, and he wanted Myra to suffer the same fate, because they were the 2 of them had shared the deeds that had led to children being murdered and buried on the moors, and he didn't feel that it was right that they should actually be exonerated in some way, least of all by her proclaiming her innocence. I went back repeatedly and spent, I don't know, about 18 hours in the end sitting in private with Ian Brady, much of the time struggling to understand what he wanted to get out.
Despite being heavily sedated on drugs, Brady makes an admission that will throw the case wide open once more.
He ended up admitting that there were other victims, that they were on the moors. He was never going to put a cross on a map so that I could take 10 paces in from the road and dig up a body.
More than 20 years after Pauline and Keith vanished, this is the most information anyone has got from Brady. Fred finally takes his findings to his newspaper.
That generated a number of interesting little tidbits of information coming in to the police, and eventually the head of CID at that time, Peter Topping, decided to form a group to review and reinvestigate the whole thing.
This leads detectives to question Myra Hindley once more, with little expectation of getting a straight answer.
We just literally walked in one day and confronted her and said, you know, would you talk about it?
During this time, Keith's distraught mother, Winnie, sends a letter to Hindley, begging to know what has happened to her son. Whether this letter influences the killer's next move, we will never know.
The first thing she said to us, well, how can I help? What do you want to know? And very quickly she said that she would be prepared to point out areas that were of interest to Ian Brady, and those were her words, not mine, areas of interest to Ian Brady on Saddleworth Moor, which was probably code for where the missing children were.
Officers spend months trying to coerce the notorious couple into revealing what they know. Eventually, they agree to take Hindley back to the moors in an attempt to jog her memory.
Obviously, this was all top secret and done covertly.
Despite this, a government minister decides to announce the plan, and the world's media descend onto the moors to catch a glimpse of the operation. Police deploy decoys to try and manage the attention.
Hindley made 2 visits there. It was a case of, I'm prepared to point out areas that are of interest.
It is after her first visit back to the moors that Hindley finally reveals what so many people have been waiting decades for. The world's most reviled child murderers, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, have been locked up for almost 20 years. But in a shock move, both not only decide to admit to further killings, but to provide details of what happened to the children, information their families have been begging for. It is 23 years since Pauline Reed disappeared off the streets of Gorton, and only now do her family learn of her fate.
They'd worked out a code. Hindley was driving a minivan, Brady was riding a motorcycle, and when they encountered on the street a likely victim, Brady would flash the lights of his motorbike. Hindley would stop opposite the potential victim.
They both saw Pauline Reed walking down the road, and he flashed the headlight of the motorcycle, and she pulled in. And it was only when she pulled in she realised that she knew Pauline Reed. They were neighbours, and Myra Hindley persuaded her to get into the car with her to go and find a glove that she'd lost.
When she got to the moors, they were joined by Brady, who pulled up on his motorbike. Brady was introduced as Hindley's boyfriend. He took Pauline Reed onto the moors.
Pauline was attacked and murdered, then left in a shallow grave. The details of Keith Bennett's last moments now also come to light.
He was on his way to his grandmother's home in Gorton when he was picked up in the street. In his case, he was asked if he would help load some boxes into Hindley's vehicle.
He's taken up to Saddleworth Moor yet again, and the 3 of them park the car at Howgrain and walk out onto Saddleworth Moor. Brady had hidden a spade on the moor, and that is collected en route. And of course, the little boy's taken down into Shiny Brook, murdered in a gully there.
With this renewed line of questioning, Hindley also gives an insight into the fate of 12-year-old John Kilbride.
Hindley was wearing a wig to conceal her identity, and she asked John Kilbride to come and help them. Somehow or other persuaded him to get in a car with them, and of course that was what happened. He was taken up to Saddleworth Moor. She dropped Brady and John off on the moor itself and drove away and stayed away for half an hour or so, and then went back and picked up Brady, who obviously was alone by that time. He'd murdered John Kilbride.
I think she was worse than Henley. For a woman to do what she did was worse than Brady.
And despite Leslie's family receiving some justice 20 years before, it is only now they find out further details from her killers about that fateful night.
She was stood near a ride when Hindley, of course, moved in again. And she looked a likely victim. Brady arrived on the scene. On this occasion, they managed to drop some shopping, and Leslie agreed to help them pick it up. And that too, in fact, signed her death warrant, because she was persuaded to go back into to get into the vehicle. And in her case, they took her to this house in Wardlebrook Avenue in Hattersley.
Shortly after these shocking confessions comes another discovery on the moors.
We asked, was it daylight or dark when Brady murdered Pauline Reed? And she said, well, it was just going dusk. I remember this because I could see the outline of the hills on the opposite side of the valley. There was only one specific point where you could actually see the hills on the opposite side of the valley. So we knew instantly that that was what she was talking about. So it narrowed our search area enormously, and it was a chance question and a chance answer that really put us on the right track.
In the case of Pauline Reade, they did in fact locate her remains, which was really quite an astonishing development. 24 years after she'd been buried on the moors, they found her remains. The irony, if you can call it irony, was that they found her grave only 100 yards from what had been Leslie Ann Downey's grave.
As Pauline is finally laid to rest, the search continues for Keith, with his family tirelessly campaigning to find him.
Winnie never ever lost hope. Never lost hope. She never stopped searching. She wanted to bring him home. She just wanted to bury her son, and that's all a mother can hope to do, isn't it? Is to have your children near to you, no matter how they're brought to you. It's sad.
Myra Hindley told the police at the time, she said under caution and absolutely categorically, quite clearly, Keith Bennett was buried in this immediate area. So we're talking about a very restricted area. Why would she lie? She had no need to lie. She told the truth about Pauline Reade. And interestingly, when we took Ian Brady back to Saddleworth Moor, he walked us to exactly the same area. So, you know, there is corroboration there.
Despite Brady and Hindley visiting the moors and giving the police some information, his body is not recovered. The search for Keith becomes his family's lifelong fight, especially for his mother, Winnie.
Over the years, many people have knocked Winnie's doors and made claims to knowing where Keith is, etc.
My grandmother had false hope that many times, and it tore her apart, and no one else would see it. And how would you pick someone up and put them back together when they've been given that hope time and time and time again?
Winnie was used to people letting her down and making claims, and that's why she was very thick-skinned. But she was willing still to go up the moor with whatever claims people made. It could be that chance, that day, that second, that something could be found, or someone was telling them the truth.
As the years turn into decades, rather than fading, the desire to find Keith intensifies. Everyone from police forces to total strangers have conducted numerous searches on the moors and beyond. Meanwhile, Hindley and Brady fall silent once more. On the 15th of November 2002, one half of the most notorious killer couple dies at the age of 60. And despite trying to garner public sympathy over the years, Hindley is despised until the end.
She always denied the physical acts of if you wish, but conceded that because of her involvement he was able to do what he did, and therefore was as an equal, as an accomplice as he was.
Winnie Johnson, along with her family and friends, continued to keep Keith's name alive and tirelessly search for his body.
She searched for him for years and years and years, but the police told us that if we were to even take a shovel, we'd be in major trouble. So not to dig. But we did take Winnie to the spot, and she felt, she cried when she was there. She felt that there was something there.
Yet despite the unwavering support and offers of help for Winnie, she is never to receive the one answer she longs for. In August 2012, she passes away without finding her son.
She always used to say to me, Norrie, she says, promise me you'll never give up, you'll never give up looking for Keith. And I promised her that I wouldn't.
In 2013, Ian Brady has the audacity to appeal his sentence, to try and be moved from a high-security hospital to a prison.
I was hoping that he was moved to a prison, because he wouldn't be alive today. wouldn't be alive today.
Now in his 70s, Brady still shows how dangerous his mind is by attempting to minimise the horror of what he has done.
Neither Brady nor Hindley have shown any remorse for their crimes, despite the opportunities that have been open to them. To some degree, Brady, it's suggested, even celebrated his infamy.
Sadly, nothing can bring back Pauline, John, Keith, Leslie and Edward, and their relatives must endure the endless heartache.
I'm praying for him to die, Brady. I know it won't bring our Leslie back, but perhaps it would help me as regards to my sleeping pattern and whatever, thinking about it. But there again, you can never forget, or ever to forgive.
It's affected us over the years. It's not like 1 year and then it's forgotten. My children have had to grow up with very, very strict rules. You always where we can see you.
Now, over half a century since Keith's murder, what are the chances of still finding his remains?
There's a tributary running in close proximity to that string of gullies where Hindley said he was murdered and buried, and I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't take long for the remains to be damaged and destroyed. Sadly, very sadly.
Yet for Keith Bennett's family and Winnie's friends, they will not find peace unless the little boy is found.
I think most people would say it's time to draw a line. But there is a possibility. And we have to have hope that he can still be found.
Well, she wanted him at rest. She pushed a search for Keith and she tried to keep the story alive. She also wanted everyone to know that no matter what happens, you can't give up. Nothing's impossible, only improbable.
As the searches for Keith continue and his family remain hopeful, the legacy left by his mother Winnie is a tribute to her son and to all the victims affected by this horrendous crime.
As difficult as it is to live with it, you can still live. You can still do everything everyone else can do. It's just you've got something in the closet, and that the only thing that matters is that your children, anyone's children, are protected.
No other crimes have left such an indelible scar on society as those committed by Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. The mark of respect that we can pay to each victim is to remember their precious lives that were taken too soon. Five innocent children lured to their deaths by vile predators posing as responsible adults. The depraved crimes of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley still horrify generations more than half a century on.
It's haunted the psyche of the nation in a way that means we won't ever let it go.
Brutal murders and the devastation they cause is overshadowed by the infamous killer couple, whose notoriety shows little sign of waning.
I don't think the memories of the Moors murders will ever fade away.
It's never, ever forgotten. It doesn't leave you.
Crimes so deeply ingrained in British history that they changed the very fabric of our society.
Myra Hindley was described as the most evil woman in Britain.
Decades on, loved ones are still grieving.
This is what I live with all day and all night. I have a 3 hours sleep. You're still thinking about it.
Now families reveal their pain to us, with one still searching for a body after all this time.
No matter what they do, they will not give up on searching for Keith.
The murders of Pauline, John, Keith, Leslie Ann and Edward make this a crime that shook Britain. The sprawling housing estate of Hattersley, near Manchester. 17-year-old David Smith makes a call to the police, claiming to have witnessed a murder.
Police picked him up at the phone box and took him to the police station in Hyde, where, of course, police officers listened to this astonishing story that he had to tell.
Smith recalls being at a house the previous evening with 2 friends, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. There's also a third man in the house. That man is 17-year-old Edward Evans, who appears to be a friend of Brady's. But nothing could be further from the truth, and it isn't long before Smith sees a change in Brady. As he sits outside smoking, his attention is drawn to a fight inside the house.
Brady attacked him with an axe.
David Smith recounts rushing back into the room to see the visitor fighting for his life. But Brady delivers blow after blow. Allegedly fearing for his safety too, Smith helps Brady to hide Edward's body in a room upstairs.
He saw what had happened, and he went back to see his wife afterwards, and between them they realised that he was the only person who'd seen what had happened. They contacted the police in the morning, and the police went to Wardlebrook Avenue.
The house on Wardlebrook Avenue belongs to the grandmother of 23-year-old Myra Hindley, who claims she was in the kitchen at the time of the attack. 2 officers rushed to the address, with one disguising his uniform so as not to alert the occupants.
Hindley answered. He said he'd come because there had been reports of a serious crime at the house the night before. Hindley pooh-poohed the whole idea, but nevertheless he got into the house. Hindley was very reluctant to let him into one particular room, a room which was locked. Brady said to Hindley, "Give him the key."
True to David Smith's unbelievable account, the police are faced with a horrific sight.
They found the body of Edward Evans in Myra Hindley's bedroom.